Hi everybody, my name is Barry Schwartz and this is Search Buzz Video Recap. The 5 more most important things of this week that happened in Google search news are these. 1. Google's indexing bug happened again. Google's new snippet controls are rolling out starting today throughout next week. Google's Danny Sullivan said journalists should link to sources. A little bit more about that later. We have a lot of discussions around Google and links. And of course, Google Ads launched conversions by time, which we'll go into more detail. So stay tuned, and we have a lot more news to cover. First up, like we discussed, Google had another indexing bug. I believe it was about 8 hours. Google's calling this a slight delay. I reported to them on October 16th at around 2:30. I waited like hours beforehand just to make sure there was a bug, and there did seem to be a bug. Danny Sullivan said, I'm not sure if there's a bug. It might just be related to the filtering options. Later on, I'm like, it looks like there was a bug, so I wrote about it. And then Google confirmed there was an issue around 6:20 p.m., saying we are aware of an issue that may be causing slight delays in indexing fresher content. We're looking into it. And then a couple hours after that, Google said the issue is resolved. It was resolved about 30 minutes before that tweet, but Google obviously wanted to confirm that it was fully resolved. So I think the whole thing was about 8 hours, not exactly sure. But again, Google had another indexing issue with new content. Also, Google, we talked about I think 3 or 4 weeks ago, how Google's coming out with new snippet controls where you can actually control your snippets, meaning, let me just bring it up quickly so you can see. There's new snippet controls around, where is it? There's new snippet controls around having no snippet at all. Of course, we had that. It's an old one. But also specifically around the max snippet number, how long you want your snippet length to be, and the video preview length, as well as the actual preview image. Did you want it to be a none, standard, or large? There's multiple ways to handle that. We covered this before, but that's now going to start rolling out as of today, this morning, through, I believe, next week at some point. So it'll probably take about a week or so to roll out in what I've heard. So just stay tuned with that and watch it. But if you are using those snippet controls, keep that in mind. With that, and Danny Sullivan told me this unrelated, but it seems to be related. At least he told me that a few weeks ago. Google France or French-related websites now will just show a URL with no snippet at all unless they use these specific snippet controls and so forth. So there's lots of things around that. I'm personally not impacted by that. Most of my audience is not, but definitely take a look at that if you are impacted by that. There's stuff around France and Google search and things around that. Google's Danny Sullivan said journalists should link to sources. And I believe that that's been the case for a long time. I speak to journalists all the time, journalists from the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, et cetera, and I can spend literally 30 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever with them, and zero mention when they go ahead and publish their article. Zero link, zero source. Sometimes they'll say my name, sometimes they won't. Sometimes they'll link. They'll never link to me ever. I'm not saying never, almost never. So I should say that. In any event, Danny Sullivan went off on a rant, and he works at Google now, and he's had experience with this over the years, where people will interview him and never link to him. So he's like, in short, these are the tweets, but basically saying it's just proper. It's the proper attribution. If you're a journalist, write a story and cite your stories, he said. He went ahead and said the reason why this has declined over the years in terms of people linking out, but it shouldn't be this hard. Journalists should be putting pressure on institutional barriers to make it easier to cite and link to original and supportive sources, because doing it is better journalism. Truth is, I don't think journalists have the power to do that. What I do think is that Google has the power to do that. And if Google went ahead and did some type of punitive punishment to those who are not linking out to sources, maybe journalists will change their behavior. Maybe institutions behind it, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, would change their behavior in terms of linking out. Because I think linking out is very, very important. And I try to be very, very careful about citing my sources. I could be wrong sometimes and cite somebody who found it 5 minutes later or whatever it might be, but I always try to cite my sources, and I think it's very important for others to do that as well. This is fun. John Mueller said buying a used domain is kind of like buying a used car. Here's the tweet. And it's basically about, when a site, you buy a used domain, you don't know what the history is behind it. Did it have a shady link building? Did it have shady SEO? Did it have adult content on it beforehand? And sometimes it's hard to know. And it says, it's like buying a used car. Sometimes it's easier to get things working well. Sometimes it takes a really long time and a lot of work, and you still have hard to find noises in that car. Similar. I like that quote. It seemed fun to me. Google said, if you get link spam, specifically around ransom attempts, people saying, I'm going to link spam you, I'm going to do negative SEO against you. And we covered this before. John Mueller said you could ignore them. They're spam. Just ignore it. Don't worry about it. And so forth. He says, we just ignore the links. You don't have to worry about it. It keeps them busy trying to do things as opposed to improving their website. You focus on improving your website, and you don't have to worry about these link ransom attempts, link spam ransom attempts, or negative SEO ransom attempts. Just ignore it. Gary from Google said if it was up to him, he would remove the Disavow link tool. He would basically says it probably hurts more site than it helps. He said this at PubCon last week. This is quoting people who quoted him. So it says how often do site owner disavow links hurt them more than help them? He said it's often enough that if it was up to me, Gary, I'd remove the disavow tool completely. He said you could shoot yourself in the foot and it could be more damaging than helpful. So just keep that in mind. John Mueller said you should only invest in, I think it was John Mueller. No, Gary. And John Mueller actually just said this also on Twitter. But basically, you should only invest in link audits to do a link audit where you're auditing your links to your website if there was shady SEO done in its history. You don't have to do it randomly, according to Gary. Just do it if you know there's a shady past. John Mueller said that manual actions are immediate, but even though if a manual action is removed at this moment in time, it still may take time for Google's search to reprocess that and show that manual action removal in search itself. So reprocessing means that it could take time for your rankings to change and improve after a manual action has been removed. It just takes time to be processed because that's how search works. If you change the destination URL of a link, so let's say you have a link on the site. Let's say this link over here is changed to go from URL A to URL B. He said, or Gary said, the relevance of that link and the value of the link may change if you change the destination of that URL. Just keep that in mind. Makes sense, but again, I like what you go through these little details. Google said they changed the Nofollow rules to better understand the web. So it's not really helping us to use rel Nofollow versus rel sponsored versus rel UGC. Gary said it's specifically to help us, Google, understand the web better. So keep that in mind. Again, it's really to help them. That probably will change over time. But for right now, it's just to help Google. Google said if you use structured data, this is just a reminder that structured data may help Google generate actions for Google Assistant automatically. Google Actions are basically things like, tell Google that you want to listen to a podcast or show me a recipe and so forth. Structured data for podcasts, recipes, news, FAQs, how-tos Google could and will build actions around your structured data automatically without you having to actually build actions yourself. Google seems to be adding city names to the titles in the snippets for certain queries. And it's interesting because it seems to be expanding on very maybe more generic queries where location or hyperlocation is not that important. But it seems, according to multiple people, Lily Ray found it first, but a lot of people are saying this, that Google's adding to the end of your title tag the city location that service is offered. So if you're offering web development services, which is not really location specific, Google might say web development services, company name in New York City, if you're in New York City, which is very interesting. Maybe Google's getting more hyperlocal. Maybe it's a bug. I'm not sure. Google search said they don't recognize authors per se, but they recognize entities, specifically with search. In Google News and Google Scholar, Google said they do recognize authors there, but not with Google Search. With Google Search, it's more about entities, and Google looking at an author as an entity. There's a distinction there, obviously, a small distinction, an important distinction, so just keep that in mind. Google is letting you search photos within local search. So if you want to search photos of places nearby, you can now do that. Here's a screenshot basically showing digital marketers near me, and it says search photos of places of digital marketers near me, which is pretty weird, but you can do that. It's more makes sense for diamond jewelers and stuff like that, less so for development shops or marketers and stuff like that. Google My Business seems to have a bug where Q&As are disappearing. Google seems to have fixed it. I'm not sure yet, but Google Local Q&A, the questions being submitted in some cases are disappearing. Google Ads has added the ability to see conversions by time. So not used to be where if you wanted to see when a conversion happened in Google Ads, it would show you based on the date the user clicked on the ad, on the link in the ad. Now Google's saying, we'll also show you the conversion based on the date of the conversion, or based on the date. You get to pick. They added 6 new columns, conversions by conversion time, and all these now by conversion time as opposed to by click time, if that makes sense. Bing is hiring a program manager for core rankings specifically. So if you want to work with a Google search team at Bing specifically, you can become a program manager. They're hiring for that job in Seattle. And it's specifically working on core ranking at Bing around AI and machine learning. So sounds pretty interesting to me. So if you are looking for a job or you're looking for a change and you love search and you love AI, that might be for you. Purna won the U.S. Search Personality Award last week in Las Vegas. Sorry I wasn't there. She's an amazing person. Very happy that she won. She definitely deserves it. And congratulations to Purna for winning that U.S. Search Personality Award of the year. And finally, if you missed the vlog this week, it was for Dan Shure. He runs a very popular SEO marketing podcast called Experts on the Wire podcast. And he also talked to me about his theories around Google core updates, EAT, page structure, and site content, and so forth. So definitely take a look at that. In any event, thanks so much for listening to the Search Buzz video recap. My name again is Barry Schwartz. A heads up, I will be offline again. This is for the last time in a while for another Jewish holiday, this Monday and Tuesday. I will do my best to schedule a post for those days. Everyone have a great weekend. Again, today is Friday, October 18th, and that's the search news we covered over at the Search Engine Roundtable at seroundtable.com. Goodbye.